Good morning.
Morning.
Hello, everyone.
Are we going to be rebellious today without our rural dean keeping an eye on us?
Oh.
Well, I think that would be scriptural.
While the cat's away.
Well,
Well, the cat's away.
We can say whatever we like,
We've got a nice rebellious gospel story.
and
We
we've
have,
already
yes.
put
Yeah.
the whole world to rights before we started recording this morning.
I know. I know.
Quite
Gosh.
unpublishable.
Yes, you
Unpostable.
never want to hear the outtakes of Rev Chat, that's for sure.
So you can leave, dear viewer, although I might even wondering what it was we talked about before the record button was pressed,
Yes.
and see how it links into Mark's Gospel when we get there in a minute. You never knew, you probably didn't realise how rebellious 3 rural priests can be. And Callie's still here trying to find her feet and wondering how rebellious she's allowed to be.
Yeah, she's well on the way. Don't worry. Don't worry about that.
I've got such good examples to follow.
Yes.
And where was that?
So let's have a pause and I'll read the Gospel. The Gospel today is written in Mark chapter 7, beginning to read at verse 24. From there he set out and went to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know that he was there, yet he could not escape notice. But a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of Syro-Phoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home, found the child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went by way of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee, in the region of the Decapolis. They brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into his ears, and spat, and touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, "be opened." And immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered them to tell no one. But the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. They were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak."
So do we do that? The more people tell us to shut up and stop talking about Jesus, the louder and louder and louder that we shout his name out.
Well, I did think it could be a new tagline for a new decade of evangelism by saying, "Don't talk about it, don't talk about it." Because when you say that to people, they usually want to talk about it.
A different strategy for making Jesus.
Yeah, reverse psychology.
Do you find that wherever you go, even when you haven't got your dog collar on, but people know you're ordained, they want to talk about it and ask questions about it? And you're thinking, this is my recreation, this is whatever, this is my day off.
I'm busy, I'm trying to get from A to B.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people want to talk about it.
They do. They do.
And of course we do. But what does that say about our stigma? Does that mean do we put people off by people expecting us only to talk about that?
I think, I don't know, I had a conversation years and years ago with a priest I was a friend with, and I remember I said to her, you know, when I visit people, a family for, you know, arranging funerals and things, I always pray with them before I leave. And she said, "Oh, I don't think people like that, do they?" And I remember saying, "Yeah, but they expect you to." And I think only once in all the years I've been a priest, when I've said to someone, "Can I pray?" only once has they said no. Every other time. And I just think about, if you don't, people think that's what you're here for, isn't it? You know, I think sometimes we should be a bit more open. I mean, I'm sure we all do that, but
I've occasionally had the response, "Oh, no, I don't really do prayer." Well, can I pray for you in my own time then, please?
yes, I would say
I'd
that.
really like to pray for you,
Yeah,
you know, in my
I
normal
have a
daily
little
prayer.
note at
And
the
they all, in fact, invariably say, "Oh yes, thank you, yes,"
yeah.
like
Yeah,
that.
most do. I always have a little item at the bottom of our Pew's news sheet, which is emailed out every week. It's called a "Say One for Me" campaign.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just asking people, look, send your rector a prayer request, and he'll say one for you. You know, I had a friend this morning who sent me, "Oh, Chris, please can you pray for me?"
Mm,
And we do, of course we do.
yeah. But I
we,
think people are more open than we think, because just as you just said, Chris, you know, the amount of times when people they initiate the conversation often, and it's good to really listen, as well as, you know, for them to hear what we say, but to listen to what they're saying, because it can be a real eye opener. And yeah, I think
And the other one, actually, that I've never ever forgotten, and I don't think I ever will. I think this was my first year of ordination. I was in the centre of Exeter, and this guy who, well, his demeanour was somebody homeless, and he said, "Please, can you pray for me?" Which I did, and then he ended it with, "And can I say a prayer for you?"
oh
oh,
yeah,
And that brought
yes,
tears to my eyes, and it always
yeah,
does now. You know,
yeah,
because don't forget, we need prayers as well, and prayers
mm.
do make a difference.
yeah, they do. They
And
do.
I'm just so delighted with the food bank that Sonia, who runs Bridport Food Bank, was saying, you know, she'd quite value us just calling in with our dog collar, very
Mm,
gently, just saying hello. The very fact that you know, I might be there occasionally wearing a dog collar
mm,
opens up the
yeah,
potential for conversations. People can either just you know, look away, "Oh no, I don't want to talk to that dog-collared person," or it initiates conversations. You know, people will come up and
mm,
start talking, and then yes, prayer follows from that.
yeah,
And the dog collar really helps in that scenario, actually,
it
because
does.
it's, you know, it's a bit Marmite for
Yeah,
people. They either gravitate towards it or they don't.
But
but
also, they know
sometimes it
what
takes a
to
while.
expect.
Sorry,
They
Chris.
Yes,
know what to expect from you.
Yes,
yes.
You know, we're
yeah,
expected to be holy people. I think most people expect us to be holier than we are.
yeah, yeah. But I think it takes a while. I think sometimes seeing people around, it might take weeks and weeks, but just having someone around is really valuable. And then you never know when they might gravitate towards you. But just smiling at people and being around, I think it's important. It's always been a part of the food bank in Bridport, and long may it continue, I say.
Mm.
Is that still Wednesday mornings at St Mary's
Yeah,
at 11 o'clock?
yeah, yeah. And we've got a closed bank now as well, which is separate. They run it separately, but it's a real free for all in St Mary's on a Wednesday. It's full of people, and lots of hospitality as well. It's a lovely atmosphere. I think they do it really brilliantly.
Yeah,
And
I
it
mean,
was
I think
really encouraging at churches together to work out how well coordinated now we are across the week.
Yeah,
It's possible for people to receive food or hot meal or whatever almost every day of the week, not quite.
So could you give a plug for the food bank and what food and clothes it needs in the middle
Well,
of
we
web
can
chat?
do that. Yes, I don't know currently. I know they nearly always need meat, but they only have tinned or dry goods. But there are things that come up from time to time, and they sometimes do give us lists, so we could do that. Yeah.
Don't they usually have a list on their website? Do they?
Yeah, they probably do. I am not up
Don't
to
they?
date with it, so we could have a look at that. But it's weird how certain things are always needed, but how sometimes there's a glut on one thing and there's a famine on something else.
Should we change subject over to this Syrophoenician woman?
Yes.
Now there's a thought.
Because there's an awful lot there about how Jesus wasn't supposed to talk to her because of her racial background, isn't it?
Yes, and she's excluded. She's not to be talked to on many levels. She's a woman. She's on her own without a man. She's a Gentile. She's a foreigner. All
Yeah.
of that. And Jesus being Jewish and keeping
It's like he
cleanliness
doesn't
and
appear
purity.
to want to deal with her, does he?
She's advocating for herself, isn't she?
She's advocating for herself, and she bullies her way in.
Yeah.
There's a lovely book that was recommended to me years ago. I'm sure you'll know it. F.F. Bruce, The Hard Sayings of Jesus, and he talks about the fact that Jesus rejects her, and refers in this context to the dogs, and F.F. Bruce mentions the fact that this conversation, we read it on the page, we read the words as they're written down. What we don't have is the inflection. We don't have. He talks about Jesus having a twinkle in his eye.
Yeah.
Could he have had a twinkle in his eye when he said those words?
Well, that's how I always think of it. I think it's also for the others, for their benefit, not only
Yes.
talking to him, but it's, oh, well,
Yes,
I could imagine.
As a Jew, I'm supposed to say blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think.
So I would just admire her persistence as somebody who is normally rejected. And actually, Jesus does do what she wants. The end result is a successful outcome for her daughter.
And I guess you have more confidence and more boldness when you are advocating for someone else, because she is desperately worried for her little daughter, and she would do anything. If she was asking for herself, perhaps she would have not had the same courage. But we all know that, especially for children, parents would want to do whatever they could, and it gives them a different kind of courage.
Do you think this gives us an opportunity to reach out to those that feel rejected in society today?
Yeah, there's another take. There's another way of reading the text as to whether the Syrophoenician woman changes God's mind. And there's a whole another way of looking at that. You think of this isn't without precedent. You think of Moses pleading with God, and Abraham pleading with God to change God's mind.
Yeah.
And is she changing? Is she changing God's mind? Jesus's mind. That's a whole nother kind of way of looking at it.
It is, yeah.
So that something about, we were reflecting part of our rebellious reflections earlier, giving a spoiler alert, giving it away. We were reflecting on Grenfell, weren't we? And how awful it is when people don't have a voice. And so it's allowing space for people to have a voice, their voice to be heard.
Yeah.
And And only if we hear those voices can we really understand people's needs.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, the idea of changing God's mind, you know, I mean, for some people that would be, you know, their motivation for prayer. I guess in a way, God is so big that you know, it's more, I would say, more about us seeing how big God is rather than him changing his mind. But I think it is a good thing to reflect on, because you know, why does God want us to communicate like that? You know, it is about changing our hearts as well, you know, because when we reach out like that, it kind of it's, you know, God doesn't need anything from us, but God is in relationship with us, and it kind of changes us by trying to change God's mind. It's seeing that it's bigger. God is bigger than we could ever imagine. But it's a generosity of God to say, come on then, let's have the conversation. You know,
yes, that God would want to have the conversation with us and care about what our opinions are when God is all knowing.
You know, like in the Psalms, when people are raging at God, you know. And last week, in church in our parish, we used a long reading from Job. You know, where were you when I did this, that, and the other, when I created this gorgeous world? You know, God is in debate, and I think God wants that. I think so. I think Jesus maybe set it up, or I don't know, but I think he delights in that woman coming back at him, and we should not feel we can't, because God isn't going to shatter into a million pieces because we question. We are allowed to.
Do you know, I hadn't really seen it that way. That's lovely. That's a really lovely insight, Deb, to see that conversation that Jesus is having with the woman as a bit of a model for how God wants us to be in conversation with God. That's really helpful. That's deepened my understanding.
It's all this rebellion that's going on.
That probably sounds like a sensible point to stop on that point, isn't it? Is do engage with God.
Yes.
And listen. And well, thank you very much for listening, everybody.
Yeah. I won't see you now for a long time. I'm off. I'm off on my sabbatical, but I will.
Deb's off on sabbatical. Reverend David's on holiday this week and next week. I'm on holiday for 3 weeks. So you might get a Cali One show.
David, I think, is back next week, but putting me in charge of the tech. So that'll be interesting. We'll see how it works. We'll need Harry's help.
Yes, we will.
But I think putting you in charge of tech is probably better than the other option.
Yes, definitely.
Sorry, David, didn't mean to say that.
David would agree.
Well, thank you all very much. I shall go and email this off to Harry, and
see you next week.
Have a good day, and see you next week or the week after.
Have a lovely holiday, Chris.
And have a good few months.
Have a lovely holiday and a wonderful sabbatical, Deb. We'll miss you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.